In this episode, I'm going to cover Firebase real-time database persistence. I'll talk about saving real-time data, streaming real-time data, updating text fields with real-time data, and updating lists with real-time data. So what I want to do is start by going to my IDE, and I have a bare bones project already created, and over here on the left is what I've created. So what I want to do is show a list of mountains, and I want to add an item to the mountains. And to do that, I want to click on the floating action button, and I'm going to click on that. And what it will do is take me to the mountain. It will create one, and then I can edit its name, like say Mount St. Helens, and add that. And it'll update in real time. This is not a form functionality here. This is updating in real time. So in this case, I don't have a save button. It saves on the fly on each character. Okay, so then if I go back, then I should have that mountain in my list. So how would I do that? Well, what if it's empty as well? If it's empty, I'll delete it on the way back, but I'm not going to cover that empty deletion in this episode. Okay, so to get started, I'm going to go to the add button here, and it's constructed at the bottom here in my home page. And in the home page, I've already constructed a method body for create a mountain. So when I tap on floating action button, I want to create a mountain. So how would I do that? Well, I don't have the database persistence method created for that. I simply put a navigator call here to route to the edit mountain page once I click on the button. I can't do that in this model. So what I want to do is create the database function to create the mountain before I push to the mountain page. Okay, let me just do that. So I'm going to create a library, new, and I'm going to go select Dart file, and I'm going to call it database. And why am I calling it database.dart? Well, this library is just going to have my functions in a class. They're going to be static functions that basically say, I want to create a record, I want to delete a record, and such. Okay, so then I'm just going to encapsulate them in database. It's a generic library at this point. If I want to get more specific in my larger projects, I usually give it a name so it's easier to read, because it might be tasks or items of some other sort, and I may want to call it more specifically, like mountains database. Okay. Anyways, I'm going to call it database to be short in this episode. Okay, so now that I have the database, what I want to do is name a class in here, and I'm just going to call it database. So it's easy to reference and small and short. Okay, after I've created the database class, I'm going to copy and paste to speed up the tutorial a little bit so I don't have to walk through my typing of the syntax. So let me just copy that in, and let me copy in create mountain. And there's a couple pieces I want to copy, and I got to copy the import next, and I'm using the Firebase database, and I'm going to use the international library. So, and what does that mean? So let's look at that. So I'm going to go to the pubsec.yaml, and I've got to add that to my list, and I have the Firebase database and international, and I'll leave a link to the README of how to get this update. Once I added it, I press on get. And this allows me to use some time functions. And so let me go back to my database. So I'm going to close this and go to the database. So I'm going to leave a link to this source in the gist below so you can see what I did after the video. So I'm going to alt import the library for Dart async. And I have two helper methods in here. And I'll explain this more once I copy in the methods. Okay, so I have these two, and I'm going to paste them at the end, and I'm going to make them top-level functions for my class. In my bigger project development, I encapsulate these in other classes, such as a helper class. Okay, let me explain what I want to do with get account key. Well, in a larger project, I have an account creation process. Well, I want to group all my mountains by an account so that way that folks that log in and are under that account can see the mountains. So I'm going to emulate this process to some extent. And I wanted to also show how I could depend and wait for another value, because in the real-time database, you have to link or manually link. It's not like SQL where you can have joins. So I have to provide the account key in the child process. So what I want to do is get the account key, which is a future, and I'm just going to say emulation here. It's async. I don't need to necessarily have the async, but I'm going to say I have some pretend logic in here that I have to wait for. And then I'm just going to return back a key, a pretend emulated or mocked key in this process. And that key is going to be a child. So I'm going to say accounts. For the accounts, for this account key, I have the list of mountains. I'm going to push a key onto that. And then once I get that, I'm going to create a new object, which is a map of a name and the created date. So if I go to get date now, it requires the international library, and I can get the date, and it's basically going to be a string that looks like this. And then I use the formatter to format that. Okay, so then I return that as a string for created. Okay, so then I can create a mountains object. Okay, so then I'm ready to go. Let me go back to main. And now I can say what I want to do. Instead of navigating first, I want to create the object first. So I'm going to call database and then dot. But before I do that, I'm going to import it, import the library. And now I can say create mountain. And then after I create it, I'm going to say then string mountain key. And then I'm going to create a method body inline method body here, multi-line, I should say. What I want to do is then navigate to my edit page with that key. So I'm going to define my route. I want to edit my page at. I'm going to go var route equals new material page route and enter for auto completion. And it wants a required argument here, and I'm going to terminate the line. So null, what do I need to put there? So I'm going to go command click on builder. It's a widget builder. So what is a widget builder? It's giving me, okay, so I need to create a function with this parameter here, build context and return a widget. Okay, so I'm going to go back to main and just paste in what I copied, build context, and then I'll just add in a method body here. I could use a fatter function instead of the method body, but since it's in line, I'll create the builder function. So I'm going to go return and new edit mountain page. And I want to provide it a mountain key. Mountain key is going to be my mountain key that I just created in this database context. So I'm going to pass it to that and then terminate that line. Okay, so now that I've created the route, I need to navigate to it. So I'm going to call the navigator of this build context. And then I want to push the route in this case and terminate that line. So what will happen is it will create an empty mountain item and we'll push to the new page. So I'm going to save it, hot reload, go to the floating action button and press on. Okay, I should have created an item in the database. And if we look at the database here, it created a new item that has an empty name and created date. Okay, so that's great. So that's the first item. So what happens? Let's just go back and do that again. So I'm going to create another item. So now I have two empty items. Well, now I want to edit the item. Well, here's where if I want to go back, I want to listen for back and then just say, hey, if the name is empty, just delete it so it's not in my list. That may be one way to do it. There's probably other ways to do it as well. So in this case, I just want to show a quick example of real-time database editing. Okay, so now that, let me go and edit an item. And now that I have it in here, I want to be able to type in this and have it update the item in the list. So let me just delete all these empties and go back here and create a new item. And so I have just one item and we'll work from that. Okay, ready to go back. And how do I do that? There's two steps here. One, I got to create a stream back to update the item just in case it was updated on the database. And two, I got to, when this value changes here, I got to update the database. So let me go to that. That's the edit page. Let me just close these other items here in the list and go to edit mountain. I have a couple to-dos in here, just marking what I said. Here's where I'll update from the database. I'll create a subscription to a stream that will listen for updates. And then down here where the value is changed in the text field, because I just have a simple text field, I'm not using a form where I click on save. I want to observe any characters typed in here and update that. Okay, so how would I do that? So I need to create a database function to save here. So let me go to the database. I'm going to click on the database library and I'm going to paste this in to save a little time. Okay, so I pasted in save name and I'm going to provide the mountain key, which I just persisted when I created the item. And then I'm going to update the name. So how does that look? So I'm going to get the account key because I need the account key just like I did in this other create mountains. I'm putting the name under the mountain mountains, the mountain key, and the name. So let me look at that. So I have reference, I have accounts, account key, I'm grouping them by accounts. Then I have a list of mountains for that account. Now I've created a mountain key, and then I want to persist the name. So how does that look? So if I look at this accounts, account key, mountains, and then the mountain item key, and then we have the name. This is what I want to update. Okay, so if I go back to the database, persistence model here. Okay, so then I'm going to set the name. Okay, now that I can do that, let me go back to main. And how would I do that here? Okay, so let me go back to edit mountain, and now I want to persist the database. So I'm going to call that database method. So I'm going to call database, and it hasn't been imported yet. So I'm going to go alt enter, import library, and then I'm going to go save name. And by the way, I'm not dealing with exceptions here. So in this context, I'm just explaining how to persist the data. I'll cover in another episode how to deal with exceptions and what the options are. So now that I have the mountain key, I passed in the mountain key. Well, I did that by I created a stateful widget. In that constructor, I pass in the mountain key as a stateful external variable. And in this case, I need to put final here. And I have now the mountain key. So let me say mountain key. How do I get access to that? Because it's in the state class. So let me go down. I'm going to access that by going widget.mountain keys. So let me just command click on that. And you can see it goes right to the reference in the stateful widget. Okay, so then if I look at the state here, I'm building, and when I click on the change, I go mountain. Okay, I need to save the name. How do I get the reference to the name for that? So that will be value. I can change that to value, and then terminate the line. Okay, so then let's say if I had an error, I want to just cover that. So I can say catch error or when complete. Or then, so I'm going to say catch error, and then I could process that. Okay, so I'm not going to cover that in this episode. I'll cover that in another episode in more detail. Okay, so let me just see if this works. So I'm going to hit hot reload. I am on the mountain, and so what I want to do is go to the database just to verify, and I'm going to type in mountain and mount. And I can see as I type in, it updates the database mount, St. Helens. What if I wanted to change it on the database by erasing Helens, and I could just update that? Well, it didn't update my text field. Well, how do I update the text field from the database? Well, let me do that. Okay, so then I got to listen to a stream. So I'm going to go to the database, and I'm going to copy and paste in that function here because I've already built it. It does save a little bit of time. Let me do that. Okay, let me explain what I pasted in. I have a future that returns a subscription of an event. Okay, so then I'm calling this method or function get name stream, and I put stream on it because I have a little bit different wiring here. And so I'm wrapping up basically a stream subscription with an on data callback. I call this a callback because I'm just providing it a function that returns a name, but my return type is going to be a stream subscription. And I'll tell you why this is important to keep track of this reference here in a minute so I can prevent memory leaks. Okay, so now that I have my function ready to go, so I'm going to get my count key because I have to get the accounts, the count key, the mountains. I'm going to get the mountain key in this case because I'm just listening to the child name for updates in this context. I could listen to the entire object in this context, but I just want to listen to the name. It might be a little heavier if you have quite a few items in this list that you want to stream. So you may want to move up one child and listen to the entire mountains object and update each item in one go. In this case, I just want to show the granularity of the names. So then I'm going to call onValue, which provides a stream that I listen to. And then for each event in that stream, I'm just going to cast that value, this value here as a string, and then I'm going to call it name. And if it's null, I'm just going to make an empty string and then pass it back to onData. I like to put if null here, then make it empty so I don't have to catch and provide operators for that in my logic in my view. Okay, so then I return the subscription to the stream because I want to cancel it when I'm done with the page and dispose of it. I don't want to keep that around because that will cause, this is very important to return a subscription. Now you don't have to build this in a future method. You could do it right in your view. But I like to extract it into methods and keep all my database methods together so I can change them. As well, you could probably create constants values for the strings here so it's harder to make string syntax mistakes or spelling errors. Okay, so I'm going to go back to Edit Mountain, and now I'm ready to construct my stream. And where will I do that? I'll do it in the init state. So once the page is initialized, I want to initialize the string as well. So I'm going to go database. I'm going to call that database library and then say, okay, I want to get my name stream. And then the mountain key, so I got to reference that widget.mountain key. And then here's my onData method, and I'm going to terminate the line to start with. Okay, so this onData, I want to update my name. So I'm going to make an update name method to extract it out. I don't like to collapse all my logic in one spot. This is just an example of one way to do it. You could write everything in line here, but I'm going to go Alt-Enter and create a method update name. And this brings it down to the bottom, and now I can update the name. And what will I do in that update name? In this case, I'm going to come back to it because it's a little bit more complicated than just setting the value. So I'll come back to that in a moment. Let me finish up because it's really important here it's really important to note that I have to keep a reference to the stream subscription so I can dispose of it when I'm done with this page. Okay, so then I'm going to return the value of the stream subscription, and I'm going to go stream subscription. And that's going to be S, just to make it short. And then what I'll do is a function inline here. And let me just put this on the other line as I'm getting to the end of the page there. And then I'm going to import this, import library. And I'm not going to annotate, I'm not going to spell out the generic in this case because I just need to keep a simple reference. And then I'm going to call this, let me call this my private variable subscription for my name. And then I'm going to say set it to S, which here is I have the S value, and I'm going to, okay, I got to define this. So I'm going to go up to the top. Let's go stream subscription and autocomplete. And then I'm going to go underscore and go subscription for my name and then terminate that. So then it could be null. Okay, so then I have a reference to that. So now I got to deal with that reference. So I'm going to add dispose. So I'm going to override that. So I'm going to go start typing in dispose and then enter for autocomplete. So when I'm done with the page in this process of my application, I'm going to dispose it. So I'm going to go if this is not null, if the subscription is not null, then I'm going to go paste it in and I cancel it. So that means I will no longer listen to updates on this stream. Now, if I don't cancel it, you'll get warnings or alerts in the console that says you haven't canceled, you're trying to call something that doesn't exist anymore, you need to get rid of that memory leak. And this is how you do it. Or this is one of the ways you can do it. So I just keeping a reference because I created a stream. I need to dispose of that stream because it might leak. Now you can think of a faucet leaking in the bathroom, drip, 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 drip. If I don't dispose of that, it will continue to drip after I'm done using it. Okay, so now that I've created it and I put it in its state, I'm going to run from the beginning because I've put it in its state. I got to start from start over here. So I'm going to start and press on debug button. And now I'm at the empty list. And then I'm going to press on add. And now I've created a new item. So I'm going to go to that new item. Let's just collapse the other and created a new item. Let me just move this over so I can type. I'm going to type in mount here. Focus in, mount. And then I'll go over and go to the database and type in ST and press an enter. And the update didn't update. So why didn't it update? So I haven't wired up the update name. So I got to go back to the update name. Okay, so I'm updating the stream here, but I'm not doing anything in update name. So this is an important step. So how do I update that name? So I'm going to call the controller or get a reference to the controller and say, okay, text is equal to the name. Now there's a problem with this. I'm going to cover more in a second, but I want to show that problem. So I'm going to go ahead and run this hot reload and go back to the database and type in St. Helens. Type in enter. Okay, you can see that it updated. Well, if I go over here, I'm going to get a problem in typing here because did you see that? The caret there moved to the beginning because there's a problem. Okay, so what is that problem? Well, that's the position of this caret when I type it in because it resets. Well, let me show you how to wire that up. Okay, so instead of directly setting the name, I'm going to go ahead and get the value here. And instead of using text, I'm going to go value is equal to underscore. And I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go underscore the name field controller value. And I'm going to go copy with a new text value. So I'm going to go text and the name is going to be the text value. And then I'm going to terminate this line. Oh, I got to put a comma there and terminate the line. Okay, so I'm copying the value. So let me just go control space. Well, I can see there's a selection. So that selection is showing where the caret is because I want to persist the selection, which is part of the position of where that caret is at in the input there. Okay, so I'm not going to do that. I'm just copying with the name. So I'm going to save this here by going hot reload and seeing what happens. Okay, so now I can go up and I can focus in wherever I want and update the value. And so I can't use the keyboard, so I'm just deleting. I'm using the computer keyboard to do the edits. So I want to put mount in there, but I'm going to do it on the database side this time. And so I'm going to go in and update mount here. And once I blur, it should update. Okay, so excellent. It keeps the position. So let's say I wanted to delete Helen's and press on enter, Saint Mount. Okay, so that's wrong. So let me just type in mount and I'll go Saint period. And then I'll finish up here in the input with Helen's. Okay, you can see that the caret is in the proper position because I'm using with copy with and just updating the name. So that's important to do. Okay, so now that I have the values, I can easily add an item and update an item. How do I get it to show up in the list? Well, let me do that. I'm going to go to my copy of the database and copy in the method I need next to do that. So I'm going to copy query mountains. And I'm going to go to database and I'm going to add in query mountains. And I'll put a link to this code in the description below so you can copy it. So what is query mountains? So I get the account key just like the other methods. And I get a reference to the database and say accounts for the account key, get the mountains, and then I'm going to order by child name. Okay, so that was pretty easy. It's not returning. Okay, so how do I use this? So I'm going to go to the main, and how do I wire that up? So in here, I'm going to add an item that queries the database. And once the query is up to date, I'm going to provide a list when that query is updated. So I'm going to, for speed, I'm going to copy and paste that in from what I've already created and explain it to you. So the first thing I want to do is query here, query the mountains. So I'm going to call the database, query the mountains, and I'm going to I get to import the library here, and then I get a reference to the query, and then I want to make it a query variable or internal state variable here. So I'm going to go query as underscore private, and I'm going to go query. Okay, so that finishes that. So once this is not null, I want to update the list. So how do I do that? So I'm going to scroll down, and to save time, I'm going to copy this. What I've done here is paste in an if statement with a body that gets changed to an animated Firebase list when the query is not null. Then that query is passed to the animated list, and then I use an item builder here. And the item builder construction, I've covered building lists in previous episodes, so I don't want to be redundant here. So I pass this on to the item builder, which is then creating a column that has a divider and a list tile. And this list tile then has a text value, which is the name of the mountain. So then when the query is not null, it should update the list. So let me just go ahead and run that from the beginning. Now that the Firebase animated list. Okay, so then I have 2 items in my list. So let me just add another one. And I'm going to add another item, and I'm going to say mount pill check. And then I'm going to go back, and now I have 3 items. So that's pretty cool. So now I want to click on the item and edit it. How would I do that? Well, I have the wiring almost there. I get the reference to the key of the snapshot. That's going to be my mountain key, and the value, which is going to be a map. And that map, I get the name value, of course, and I cast that to a string. In Dart 2, I'm explicitly casting that to a string. That's one way to do it. There's other ways to do it. It's a little slicker, but I'm not going to cover that in detail today. And then I just pass that. Well, the mountain key, I want to edit it, so I'm going to create an edit function. So when I tap on it, I'll create an edit mountain key. Well, in this case, I'm going to change the construction of the below here. Well, in this case, I have create mountain, and I put the edit function right in here, or what I want to extract out to the edit function. Well, I'm going to paste this in to give it a little bit more speed. I'm going to paste in the difference. So what I did is extract out and created the function edit here, and then pass the mountain key to it. So now that I can tap on the item on the left as well, and basically what now happens is I construct a material page route, then I can provide the mountain key directly to that page, and then I just push to that route. Okay, so that's easy. So let me just update from the beginning here and run that. So, okay, so it's updated. So now I can click on Mount Pilchuck and edit it and say, let me go ahead and open the database, because it's always fun to see edits in real time. And I can click on Mount Pilchuck. Let's say let's go Mount Pill. It's not a real mountain that I know of. Okay, so then I can say Mount Pill, and it updated in the list. So let's say I want to fix it over here, Mount Pilchuck, update, and it instantly updates, because the animated list, of course, noticed the update and updated it as well. So that's really slick. Firebase real-time database is pretty neat when you consider that you don't have to wire up much to get this real-time functionality. So Mount Saint nothing. I can update that, Mount Saint nothing, and go back and click on that. And what I'm not doing here is actually dealing with empty methods. So if I created an empty and clicked on back, you can see it's empty in my list. Well, I could observe that when I come back and iterate through my list and delete that. So that's an easy function, but I won't cover that in this episode. So that basically gets me to where I want to go in creating a database with real-time editing, real-time list updates. So thanks for watching today. Follow me for more tips and tricks on Flutter, and I'll catch you later.